What's up guys, welcome back to another solo leveling log. In today's video we're picking up where we left off in the book we're currently reading, which is this guy right here, Docker Deep Dive. Last time we covered chapter 1 and chapter 2, and in today's video we're going to be diving into chapter 3. If you haven't watched the last log yet, please go ahead and check that out first before you watch this one. Link is in the description box below. Also, chapters are in the description box as well, so please feel free to jump to whatever chapter you feel like interests you the most. With that being said, let's go ahead, let's get started. This chapter is all about getting Docker up and running so you can start working with containers. So basically it's about getting your environment up and running for the rest of the work in the book, I guess. So the book breaks down 3 main ways that you can install Docker, and I went ahead and tried and test all 3 of them, so you don't have to. Well, hold on. You have to if you read in the book, but hopefully kind of my experience going through the whole thing will make it a little bit easier on you as you go through it as well. So that's the goal. So hopefully you can follow along as well. First on the list is Docker Desktop. So the book recommends Docker Desktop as the easiest and the most complete way to get started. It includes things like Docker Engine, a built-in plugin, a marketplace, and even a single node Kubernetes cluster. Now, I'm not too familiar with Kubernetes yet, but don't worry. We're going to cover it in the channel. I'm going to find some more books to read about that and definitely going to cover it. It's going to be a different segment, but don't worry about that yet. It's free for personal use, but if you're working in a larger organization, you will need a license to be able to use it. So I set it up in a Windows 11 VM. So one of the things to keep in mind is that there are a few things you need to watch out for during installation, especially around virtualization support in the VM that Docker is going to be running in. But don't worry too much about that. I'll cover those things later on in details when we go through the setup process. The book tends to lean a little heavy towards Docker Desktop. And to be fair, I can see why. It looks clean, it's powerful, it's beginner friendly. So I understand why the book kind of recommend that if you're just getting started. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's see how I got things up and running in regards to Docker Desktop. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we get started, there are a couple of things that we need to check before we move on. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that I'm going to be running Docker Desktop in a Windows environment and all the sort of components in a Windows environment, except for the server, the Linux server components that I'm not going to be running in the Windows environment. It's going to be in Linux. But the reason for that is that I feel like Windows is much more accessible. Most people already have Windows and they're going to be running Windows, so it's much more easier for us to run it in Windows and kind of follow along with the book. And of course, we're going to move over to Linux, of course. And all the things that we're going to run in the Windows environment, you can still run them in the Linux environment as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, in order for us to even move forward, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to make sure that this is my local host. This is the host that Proxmox is running on. Right, this is the host that all of the VMs are running on top of, right? So this is running Proxmox, and on top of that, you have all these VMs that we can run. And if you don't know what Proxmox says, you don't know what all these other components that I'm talking about are, just take the time to take a step back and check out the some of the videos, the other videos on my channel, kind of break down what Proxmox says and the different other components of Proxmox that I've talked about already. And there's a lot more videos that are going to come about Proxmox, right? So this is my host, right? So in my host, we need to make sure that nested virtualization is up and installed or up and running on my host on the server here. Right. Again, node 0. I'm going to close some of this so it's a little bit more clear. I'm going to close that. I'm going to close that. And I'm just going to leave this guy. So my node is node 0. We need to make sure nested virtualization is running on this guy. And the reason for that is that nested virtualization, if I can say it right, nested virtualization basically just allow you to run a VM that can run other VM inside of it. So it allows you to have a virtualization environment inside of a VM that is already installed or set up on this virtualization platform, which is Proxmox, that is installed on a server. So it basically allows you to run a VM inside of a VM. But in order for us to do that, we need to make sure it's enabled. And this is going to vary based on the CPU that you're running. In my case, I'm running Intel. So for Intel, this is the command that we're going to run. So we're basically going to run this command. And if it comes back and say the Y, that means that nested virtualization is enabled. And if it comes back and say N, that means that nested virtualization is not enabled. And we're going to need to enable it for us to be able to run nested virtualization. For us to be able to run a virtualization, a VM that's going to virtualize some things inside of it. I hope that makes sense. So when I click enter here, you can see that it says Y. And why means that yes, nested virtualization is running. And if you are running, let's say, a different CPU, if you're running AMD, for example, this command is going to be slightly different. And to turn on for Intel, which is what I'm running, to turn on nested virtualization, and if this comes back and it says N, to turn it on, you just need to run this command right here, right? So what this is going to do is going to change nested virtualization. I can never say that word, right? It's going to change nested virtualization to yes. So I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and then nothing happens, of course, because again, it's already changed 1 and 2. Nothing will happen, but you can test that by going back to our previous command and running that and make sure that is up and running. So this is very important, right? I know I'm stressing it, but nested virtualization needs to be turned on for us to run a VM on this platform that's going to be running another VM inside of it. That's the easiest way that I can explain it. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is that you're going to need to upload a Windows ISO, because we're going to be installing Windows on one of our VMs, right? So to do that, you can go to any of your storage. If you don't know anything about storage, I have a video that talks about Proxmox storage, so please take the time to go check that out. So I'm going to go to my storage here, and in my case, I already upload ISO or Windows ISO. But you're going to need to either get a Windows ISO from somewhere and then upload it here. And then upload is pretty straightforward. Just click upload, select your file, your ISO file here, and you're going to see it here. And then you're going to click upload, and it's going to upload it here. So that's very important as well. So once those two things has been checked, the next thing that we're going to do is on the top right hand corner here, we're going to click on create VM. And it's going to give us this box that you normally use to create a VM. And we're going to call this whatever we want. So in my case, I'm going to call it Docker. All right, just for time, I'm going to say Docker 1. All right, and then here, resource pool, I'm going to do test lab. You can select whatever resource pool you have. Resource pool is just basically a way for you to group your VMs together. And then this, you can leave all of this as default. We're going to go to next, which is OS. And then here, we upload our ISO here. And then we're going to say Windows ISO. That's the ISO that you will upload for Windows. And then we're going to change that to Microsoft, right? And that's perfectly fine. And here you can add the VITR Vitro. I think that's how it's pronounced, Vitro drive, if you want to. These are some of the drives that it contain the ISO. This ISO, if I was to click on that and I upload it, I actually do have it. If I was to click on that and I upload it, I think I have it on a different location. This guy right here. So this basically contains some of the different components, some of the different drives that you're going to need to install for a Windows server. So it's always good to download it. And to download it's pretty straightforward. I will include on the write-up, I will include a link to it for you to be able to download the ISO. And the ISO have like different drive components that you need to install for Windows to get Windows up and running for specific things. So when you install Windows, some of the drivers might be missing. All of those drivers will be contained in this ISO right here. And probably depending on how long the video is, because I'm really trying not to make the logs too long, I will show you guys how to do that. But if not, I can always create a separate video for that. So this is pretty much fine here. We're going to go ahead and click next. Right. And then here for graphics card, you can choose a default. For the controller, you can also choose the default here as well. And then QEM agent, you can check this out to let the host know that QEM agent is going to be installed. This basically just allow the host to be able to read some of the information from the VM. So that's perfectly fine. For Windows, you need TPM. This is more so for security. I just need to select what drive you want to install that on. So I'm going to select one of my drives here, my storage, not drive, but storage. You can select whatever storage you want. Right, and then for UEFI, you're going to select one as well. You can select whatever storage you want as well. Right, so just make sure the storage that you select in is a storage that you're not going to delete, or storage that is always going to be in use, and you're not going to get rid of it. Because if you get rid of any one of these, then your VM is not going to boot anymore. You can make choices here as well, different choices as you see fit. But for now, this is okay. For disk space, I would say give the VM enough disk in regards to how much weight you're going to put on the VM. So if we're running Docker desktop on this VM, and once I set this up, this is a demo, of course, but once I have this set up, this is where I'm going to be learning a lot of the things that the book talks about. So it's going to be a little bit heavy. And in your case, I'm assuming that's the same thing. So probably you want to make it something like maybe 500 or whatever it is that you think is right, because you're going to be running containers in here. You're going to be doing a whole bunch of things. So you want to give it enough space to be able to have a bit of a wiggle room, right? So for now, I'm going to say SATA. And again, you can select whatever type you want here, but for now I'm going to select SATA. Normally I will select CSI, but for now I'm just going to select SATA for now. That's perfectly fine. Normally I would select SCSI, but for now I'm selecting SATA. That's perfectly fine. Storage, I'm going to use one of my storage pool here. I'm going to say Sandbox. This guy right here, again, you can use whatever storage you want. And then for cache, I'm going to do, for now, I'm going to do right through. Again, this is just a test, right? A little bit faster. So I'm just going to do right through. Again, you can select whatever you want. Discard is very important. It basically means that once you get rid of the VM, that will be the host will be notified and it can clean up the things that it needs to clean up. So it's always good to check this. So when you delete things, delete the storage, the host will be aware of it and it can clean things up on the host level, meaning that the node 0 level, right? CPU, again, this is going to reflect how much stuff you're going to install on the server, right? So if you're going to be running a lot of things, maybe you might want to increase it a little bit. Again, this all depends. I'm going to do four for now, 4 sockets and 4 cores, but you can choose whatever you want, whatever it is that is best for you. Or again, just gauge what you're going to be running. If you're going to be running a lot of containers on this VM to test things, just be mindful of that and assign the appropriate sockets and cores. And then for here, now we're doing nested virtualization. And for nested virtualization to work, for your VM to be able to run other VM inside of it, for the VM itself to act as a hypervisor, you need to be able to communicate directly with the host CPU, right? So in our case, you're going to scroll all the way down and you're going to select host. And that's because there's a lot of things that needs to happen when you're running a hypervisor in a VM. They need to be able to communicate directly with the host CPU to be able to make a lot of config, a lot of changes, or a lot of things needs to happen. That is not going to work if you're not communicating directly to the host CPU. So for nested virtualization to work, we always have to scroll all the way down and do a pass through directly to the host CPU, right? And again, you can choose whatever you want here, but just make sure the type here, the CPU type here is that, hey, I want this to have a pass through directly to the host CPU, right? And for memory, again, you can add accordingly. This depends on what you're going to be adding on the the VM. In my case, I'm just doing 10 for now, but you can add whatever it is that you want. Network, I'm just going to select one of my VLAN here, VLAN test. And this is perfectly fine. Default is perfectly fine. I'm going to go back to CPU. I'm going to click advanced here. There's a setting here that we need to check. So if we scroll all the way down, we want to change this from default. We want to change it to plus, which turns it on. Basically, this kind of improves the performance for nested virtualization, and it's only supported through Intel CPU, right? This particular settings is for Intel. Now, if you're running AMD, you might want to check something like this guy right here, which is not one for one for the settings, but it's going to help when you have something like an AMD CPU. But for now, we don't need that. We just need this guy. And this is very important. You need to check this for nested virtualization to work. And it tells you here as well, improve performance for nested virtualization, but it's only supported for Intel CPU. So it's very important. Do not miss this. You need to check this. And once you're done, you can always uncheck it and then just click back. But make sure this is very important, right? If you don't do this, the nested virtualization might not work for you. So just make sure you check that and then check the advanced because you don't necessarily need that. And then click next. And memory is perfectly fine. Network, again, we've already selected that. And then we're just going to confirm and then click pretty much finish. Right. So this is basically the VM that's going to have our Docker, desktop, and all of these other components that we're going to be using to test things in the book. And again, I wanted it to be a Windows environment because it's much more relatable, and it's just much more easier for a lot of people to be up and running. And again, as things progress, we're going to move from Windows environments to Linux and all that stuff. But if you fancy Linux, you can install all of those components on Linux. But I'm not going to focus too much on that because again, this series is meant as an introductory series, and then from there we can move on to advanced series. Once you have the VM up and running, you're going to see it right here. Is this guy right here? It's called Docker 1. That's what we called it. So what we want to do, this little guy right here, we're going to start this VM. So we're going to click start, and we're going to go through the the regular Windows installation process, which we know takes about, a lifetime. So we're gonna go through. I'm gonna fast forward through that, but it's just a regular Windows installation process. Nothing too crazy there. You're just gonna go through the Windows installation process, and I'll resume back once we're back on, and everything is fully installed. We're finally in Windows now after going through 10,000 steps. You gotta love Microsoft. But anyways, the next step is pretty straightforward. As long as we make sure, if I go back to hardware here, we'll make sure we're doing a pass through for our processor to our host, and nested virtualization is turned on. What I'm going to do is going to go back to the console, and now we're going to install Docker Desktop. And to do that, we just want to open any sort of browser that you have installed. In my case, I already have Microsoft installed right now. And then I'm going to do Docker Desktop here. And I'm going to scroll down, or you can just click on the first one here, and we're going to download it. So this is pretty much the page for Docker. And we're going to scroll up a little bit more, and we're going to say download Docker Desktop. Let me scroll down because it gives you a drop down, and we're going to download this guy right here. Now, again, if you want to run it on Mac, if you want to run it on Linux, it gives you a lot of options. So it's a lot more flexible in terms of like being able to run it everywhere. It just allows you to be able to run containers and manage things, and it's cleaner. Like I was saying earlier, it's cleaner. It's a lot more nicer. And again, I can see why the book is pushing towards it. At the end of the day, after I finish reading the book, I'm not going to be using Docker Desktop that much, to be honest. It's going to be running on a Linux computer. But for now, it's a good thing to be able to have it and understand that, and just kind of know that that's one place to manage containers as well, because a lot of times a lot of these things will be used in, like, let's say a professional environment. For a lot of professional environments, they use things like this to be able to manage the stuff, right? So it's always good to kind of learn that as well. So the download is going. I'm just going to give it a few for it to finish. Once the installation is done, we can just go ahead and open the download folder here and just double click on this guy, and it's going to run it, and we're going to go through the installation. I'm going to go ahead and click yes on this, and it's going to kick off the installation. I'm going to minimize some of this just so we can get those out of the way. VM's a little bit slow. I'm actually going to upgrade some things on my hardware pretty soon just to kick things off, make things a little bit faster. You get a couple of options here during the installation process. So I'm going to move this in the middle here. So you have use WSL instead of Hyper-V, which is recommended. So WSL is a Windows subsystem for Linux, right? It allows you to be able to run Linux inside of Windows, so to speak. That's perfectly fine. Allow Windows containers to be used with this installation. Also, that's perfectly fine. I think that's something that the book talked about a little. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Just in case we need it moving forward when we're doing some things in the book. And of course, you add a shortcut to the desktop as well. You can check any of these options that you want, but I'm going to go ahead and check all of them. Click OK. It's going to kick off the installation. And this installation takes a while, so we're just going to let it do its thing, and once it's done, we're going to move on from there. After the installation is done, we can go ahead and just say close and restart, and that's going to restart the VM itself. So as you can see, Docker Desktop is already here, so we're going to go ahead and let the VM restart, and then once it comes back up, we're going to try to see if we can get Docker Desktop up and running. Okay, so we're back in the VM now. After restart, we're going to go ahead and double click on Docker Desktop here. Go ahead and click accept on this guy here, and it's going to load the rest of the GUI, and then we can go okay, and then we're going to skip this. So as you can see, we have this prompt that's telling us that WSL is not up to date or is not the latest version. So we just want to go ahead and press continue for it to install the latest version. So we're just going to go ahead and click enter, and it's going to go ahead and install the latest WSL version, Windows subsystem for Linux, because I think that's needed for Docker to run. So we're going to go ahead and click yes, and it's going to go ahead and do its thing. And once that's done, then we can, as you can see, it's going through the installation now. Once that's done, we can go ahead and enter into the Docker Desktop system and be able to kind of navigate around and see how it looks like. So it might take a few, but just give it some time to let it do its thing. Now the most recent version of WSL is installed. We can press any key to exit, and we're back on the login screen here. So you have personal, you have work. We don't necessarily have to enter your email. We can go ahead and click skip for now. And as you can see, it's up and running, but it's telling us that like, hey, WSL needs to update. That's perfectly fine. That's because we went ahead and ran the update while we were in the program. So we want to either restart it or get out and get back in. Just click restart here as well too, right? So it has the option to restart there as well too. And if it doesn't work, we can just get out of it and get back into it. So let's let it do its thing and then see what else comes up. Okay, so once that's done, you can see that we're now in Docker Desktop. Everything is pretty much up and running. You have containers, but we don't have any containers up and running right now. We have images, you have volumes, you have bundles, and you have different other components of the Docker Desktop. And you have terminal as well. So if you click on this, you can enable terminal here and be able to do things here as well. So as you can see, it's a pretty nice interface, pretty clean interface. I don't have any account right now. I haven't set up any sort of account yet, but this is what the Docker Desktop look like. For this chapter, we're not really going to do much. We're not really going to dive too into it in terms of like, you know, setting up containers and things like that. I think the next chapter focus more on just kind of getting hands-on and setting containers. We'll take a look at that in the next chapter, in this chapter 4. But for now, this is what it looks like. This is what Docker Desktop look like, and you have updates here. You can click on that. You can X out of this, and you can scroll down and click on always download updates, and then you can just update and apply updates. So, and then you have Kubernetes. Again, I haven't dived too much into Kubernetes yet, but we will definitely have plans for that as well. But settings and different components and different settings here as well. You have the general settings, dark mode, that's definitely a must. All right, so you have dark mode, resources, and all that stuff. So one of the things to keep in mind as well is that with your resources as well, you definitely want to add enough stuff on this VM, because I'm sure as we go through the books, we're going to be using a lot of the resources of the VM, obviously, but you need to make sure that your VM is able to accommodate a lot of those resources. But yeah, this is what Docker Desktop looks like. And now you also have WSL installed as well. So Windows Subsystem for Linux. You have that installed as well, because that needed to be installed before Docker Desktop can be installed. And if we go here, let's do actually, let's Windows WS Windows features. You're going to see all of the things that were installed. So Windows features guide, turn Windows feature on and on. If we scroll down, there's one more components that we're going to need to install for the second setup. But if we scroll down here a little bit more, you can see virtual machine platform is checked and installed. Windows Hypervisor platform will be installed, I think, on the next stuff that we're going to talk about. So this is what I was talking about. One of the reasons why you need nested virtualization, because you're technically going to be running virtualization system inside of this VM. And to be able to make that work, you need nested virtualization, and you need to have a pass through to the host CPU, right? So that's what we did for this VM, and we're good to go. Next up is Multipass. This one was new to me until I started reading about it in the book. So Multipass is basically a tool by Canonical that lets you quickly spin up a Ubuntu VM on Windows, Linux, or Mac. It gives you a fully functional Ubuntu environment in seconds. It's perfect for things like, let's say, if you want to test Docker in a clean Linux or Windows setup without having to set up a full VM manually. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be using this heavily, but honestly, it looks really cool and it might come handy later on in the series. So, of course, I decided to go and play around with it to try to see how it looks like, how it feels, and how to set it up. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that. All right, so the next component that we need to install, and again, my goal is to use just one VM for the rest of this book. It's going to be a Windows VM, and then I will switch over as time goes on, right? And of course, outside of the Linux side of things, it's just going to be a Windows VM, because I also, like I said, I also think that it makes it easier for people to follow along. So the next step is Multipass. So Multipass, same concept. We're just going to go online here, and we're going to say Multipass. Actually, it's already there. So we're just going to click on Multipass there. And again, this is created by Canonical. And it's only for Ubuntu. So we're going to click on it. Looks something, accept. That's fine. Looks something like this. So we're going to go ahead and say install. I'm going to scroll down for those of you guys that want to see what it looks like. I think I showed that in the video earlier, but just one more time. I'm going to go ahead and say install. And then we're going to say we have Windows. As you can see, again, you can install it on Linux if you want to. And I will show you guys that. But we're going to go ahead and say Windows. We're going to scroll all the way down here, and we're going to say download Multipass for Windows, and it's going to go ahead and do its thing. And once that's done, we're going to go ahead and run it and go through the installation process. And it's pretty much done now. So we're going to go ahead and click on it, or you can open the location of it. But I just clicked on it. I'm going to minimize this, and it's going to do its thing and load. And we're going to click on next. All right. And then we're going to click on accept here, and then next. And Microsoft Hypervisor, which is recommended. Again, this is pretty much going to turn on if I can pull this. What is it? What are Windows features? So I'm going to click on that again. It's going to turn. I'm going to let it load. It's going to turn something on here. So if I scroll down, it's most likely going to turn this guy on, and it needs that guy to be able to set up some of the VMs that you're going to be set up in a virtual environment. Again, the whole concept of nested virtualization. So that's perfectly fine. Which is the recommended version. You can choose VirtualBox or Core VM VirtualBox if you want, but the recommended version is Hyper-V, and it makes sense, right? Because you're in a Windows environment. So click on Next. Add multipass to current user path. That's recommended. It's just adding it to as a environment variable. So if we right click on this, for example, go to System. My computer is a bit slow. I'm going to do some hardware upgrade on the server just to make things a little bit faster. And if we scroll down here, all the way down here, and go to Advanced Systems, and then we'll go to Environmental Variables here. We'll go to Path. It's probably just going to add the path here, so it makes it easier for you to be able to access the software anywhere on your VM. So it's just basically that's what it's asking you. Do you want it to add it here? That's perfectly fine. Because if it doesn't, then you're going to have to add it manually. So I'm going to get out of that. Get out of that. Get out of that as well. Just perfectly fine. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Actually, let me go back one more time and say add multipass to the system, but for all users. Let's do that. Let's not just do it for the current user. Let's do it for all user, because if, let's say, I create a new user on this computer, I want that path to be this because I don't want to manually add it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the second option. So click next. If you're going to install it on a separate drive, of course, you can choose it here, but you might see it's fine here. And then click next. Go ahead and click install. It's going to give you the prompt probably, and just going to go through the installation process. All right, here comes the prompt. So we're going to go ahead and click yes, and it's going to go through the installation process. Again, pretty straightforward as the Docker install. These are kind of the two things, or the two of the three things that the book talked about, and we're going to do two of them in Windows, and then the other one, of course, is going to be on Linux, right? Because installing Docker on LXC container. So let's give it a few for it to finish. Once it's done, we're going to go ahead and click finish, and it's going to tell you that it needs to restart the system because it did install some of the features here. So once you install it, this is most likely going to be checked. Not most likely, it's going to be checked because we just enabled it. But I need to restart it to kind of finish that setup process. So we're going to go ahead and click yes. And it's going to do its thing, restart. And once we're back in, we can try to run multipass. All right, so we're back in, up and running. So we're just going to do multi here. And then you can see multipass just comes up. We're going to pin that to the text bar just to have it there. And then we can just click on it to get it up and running. I'm going to X out of that. I did not need that. So I'm going to click on that for multipass to be up and running. And then we're going to test some things. So it's going to do its thing, and it's going to tell you, it's going to give you an option here. So this is what multipass looks like. As you can see, it has different version of Ubuntu here that you can launch as an instance. And if you have your instance, you can just click on instance here, and it give you a list of all of the instances that you're running. My VM just started. It's a bit slow. Actually, I have two multipass versions. I'm going to close one of these actually. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You can launch any one of these here. So as you can see, I have different option. And again, it makes it super easy if you are in, let's say, a Windows environment or like a Mac environment or something. You just want an instance of Ubuntu up and running. It looks something like this. And then you can just click launch, and it's going to start creating that virtual environment for you. Again, one of the things to keep in mind is that you want to make sure your VM is capable of handling this load, right? Because it's going to be pulling things down, as you can see here. It's going to be creating these instances, and it's going to be using some of your computer resource, or your VM resource. So you want to make sure your VM is capable of handling this load. So while it's doing that, we're going to go back to Windows, and the AWS here. And then we're going to go to turn on Windows features again, and we're going to see what was turned on. So I'm sure Hyper-V has been turned on. Just give it a couple of seconds here. So as you can see, Hyper-V has been turned on. And again, this is where nested virtualization and all that other stuff comes into play, because without it, it wouldn't work. So it's creating another virtual environment here. We're going to let it do its thing. It's going to create it, and then we can just use that Ubuntu, ready-made Ubuntu instance that we can just use to be able to install Docker. So once the setup is done, if we go to instance now, we can see that we have one instance running here, right? So this is the instance that we just created. If we click on it, it's going to take us directly to the shell, and we just click open shell here, and then just like that, we have a Linux system or Ubuntu system that we can install Docker on, right? So /la whatever Ubuntu system we can install Docker on. Again, very fast, very easy. It just makes things so convenient in terms of like being able to, if you're running a Windows environment, to be able to boot up Ubuntu and then just have it up and running. You can have several of them, so you can launch another one if you want. You can just go back to catalog, select the one that you want, and just run it and have another instance, and then you can have Docker install in this particular instance, and then be able to run Docker on this guy right here. So that's one way that the book talked about to be able to get Docker up and running as well. If you have a Windows environment or a Mac environment or any sort of other environment that you want to install Docker on. So these are the two main ways, right, to do it. One of the things that I want to talk about as well is, like I said earlier, this is something that you can do in Linux as well. So this is a Windows environment, and the reason why I chose the Windows environment is just to make things a little bit easy, so people can follow along. Anybody that wants to follow along as I go through and try to grasp some of this concept, you're welcome to do so, because not everybody have like a whole like virtual environment set up, but a lot of people have a Windows computer that they can have things set up. Just again, the only thing that you have to keep in mind is the resource, right? So just for example, if I go to another one of my, let's say, Linux server here, just log in here. All right. You can see that I already have Docker Desktop installed on this guy as well. So same concept, as you can see, it's running here, and you can see images, container, and I do have Multipass installed, and I have Multipass set up here on the UI. So if I do ls-la, you can see that this is a Windows, I'm in a Ubuntu environment, but it's running Pop! OS. If I was to click exit here, it's going to get me out. And if I was to do ls, I'm running Pop! OS right now, right? So Pop! OS 24+4. But if I was to do something like this, Multipass shell, because I already have Multipass installed on this guy, just click enter. It's going to go ahead and run that, and that's it. I'm in a Ubuntu system, and I can just install it here and just run anything I want here. So again, I see all of this to say that you can install it on a Linux server or you can install it on a Windows server. But I choose to kind of, for the rest of the book, I'm going to focus on the Windows side of things, only because I want it to be much more relatable than having to go to Linux. And don't worry if you don't understand how Linux and all this other stuff, it's perfectly fine, because we're going to mature into it, right? So we're going to go from Windows, and slowly we're going to kind of go over, once we understand how Docker fully works, and go over and install Linux as well. So yeah, that's one thing to keep in mind. You can choose your path, so to speak. And finally, the classic route, which is basically installing Docker directly on a Linux server. This is the method that is used or done in most home lab. It's straightforward, it's stable, but I wanted to push things a bit further. So instead of a full Linux server, I tried installing Docker inside an LXC container. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that Docker themselves do not recommend this at all, especially in an unprivileged container, due to stability and security concern. But hey, this is a test lab, and of course I wanted to test things out a little bit more, so I'm like, why not? Just to be clear, this LXC experiment isn't in the book, right? The book's instructions are focused on the traditional Linux server setup, which works just fine. but I wanted to test the limit. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at how I did that. All right, so I went ahead and set up the LXC container already. It's this guy right here, the Docker test container. If you don't know how to set up an LXC container, please feel free to check out some of the other videos on my YouTube channel. The reason why I'm going to speed run through this because this is where I'm going to have to do a lot of testing when it comes to LXC running Docker and LXC containers. Because as I said earlier, this is something that's not even recommended because one of the things that you one of the issues that you're going to run into is that you're running if you think about it, you're going to be running a bunch of containers inside of something that's already a container that's designed to be lightweight. So there's a lot of obstacles that you're going to run into there, especially when it comes to permission issues as well. Because if you look at this is an unprivileged container, right? So if you're running Docker on an unprivileged container, Docker might need access to certain things that an unprivileged container do not have access to. So I'm thinking that I'm going to need to make a lot of changes in terms of permission and make sure the right things are set to make sure that Docker has permission to the things that it needs to have access to. Again, as I said, this is mainly going to be something that I have to validate and test a lot. And of course, you guys are going to be here for that. But for now, we're going to speed run through the installation. So the first thing that we need to do, this is a new install, of course. We're going to try to log in here. All right. Okay, now we'll log in. We're going to do apt. We're going to update the system real quick. Okay, and let all of the updates run. That's good. Let's do apt. I should have just added an upgrade as well. Just run that. Yes, that's fine. Just gonna let all of that run. It might take a few, but as this is updating, yeah. So as I was saying earlier, the Docker on an LXC container is not recommended at all. But I feel like I've read a bunch of stuff online that people say that they're running it, and some people say just don't touch it. It's like a divided opinion about this, but it's something I definitely want to test. And of course, if it doesn't work, you can just run it on your Ubuntu server and then just call it a day, right? But it doesn't hurt testing it. It helps save space to run it on something like this. So that's done. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install a couple of tools that might be needed for the install. So I'm going to paste that command in here. So we're just installing a couple of tools here. We're going to click enter. It's going to pull those down. And this is some of the tools that are going to be needed once we start, let's say, and pull down the certificates and echo things into other repositories so we can install our Docker. So the next thing that we're going to do is just going to pull down the key, the GPG key for the Docker repo here. Again, I'm speed running through this, but don't worry. We're going to take a deeper dive into working with Docker on an LXC container. For now, again, this whole chapter is more so kind of getting your environment up and running. But we're going to test things. We're going to see how they work, and we're going to break a lot of things. But for now, we're going to pull this down, and I'll include all of this in my in the write up as well. So click enter there, and this has been pulled down. Right, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the repo for Docker, and we're going to run this command right here. What this is going to do is it's going to add the needed repo for Docker. So now that we've added that repo for Docker, the next thing that we can do is just do apt update one more time. And after that, we can do the installation of Docker and the Docker CLI and all that good stuff. So we're going to do that, paste that in, and then just click enter. So now we're doing app install a Docker CLI, and we're installing Docker and all the plugins for Docker. So this is pulling down Docker and it's installing Docker. And after that, we're going to check and see the version that we have. Again, speed running through this because one, I'm trying not to make I'm trying not to make the log videos as long as the regular videos, but sometimes we're gonna have to because this is where the deep dive happen. Right. So I'm gonna click enter, and then now if we do something like, let's say, check the Docker version that's installed, and for that we can do something like docker -- VRSION version. and then we can see that we now have Docker installed. So this is pretty much how we will install Docker and an LXC container. But again, do this with caution, because one, this is not recommended by the book. The book recommend having a virtual machine itself. So maybe installing something like, let's say, Ubuntu server version, and then just installing Docker on that, and then running Docker on that, because you allow Docker to have the permission that's needed. You allow Docker to be able to run the way it's supposed to be run. Wherein in my case, I'm going to be running an LXC container. LXC container in itself is a container, and I'm going to be running Docker in there that's going to containerize a lot of things, right? So it's not ideal, but again, the whole idea of this series is to test, break, and learn things. So we're going to install an Alexa container, test it, and if it doesn't work, hey, it's just a matter of installing something else and running it on it. But pretty much that's how we will install it on an Alexa container, and this is currently the Docker version that we're running. So those are the three main install options that the book walked through. So you have Docker install, you have Multipass, and then you have the Linux server setup, which in my case, I went ahead and did it on an LXC container just to see how things work out. From what I'm reading so far, it looks like the book is heavy on using Docker desktop, and honestly, I can see why. It's similar to tools like, let's say, Container, which gives you a super friendly UI for managing containers. I will still be testing things like the LXC container and poking around with things like the Multipass, but for the purpose of following along with the book, Docker Desktop will be the primary focus moving forward. At this point, we've got an environment set up and ready to go, and we're taking things one chapter at a time, and we're making beautiful progress, right? So I will see you guys in the next one. Stay geeking, stay curious, and as always, peace.